So, big news breaking out of Columbus, Ohio yesterday. Ted Carter, the president over at Ohio State, has resigned. Yep. Stepped down after coming clean to the board, kind of coming clean. It depends on who you ask. To the board with some inappropriate relationship with, quote, someone who was apparently, well, not that quote. It was someone who was apparently looking for public resources to boost their personal business, whatever that means. Look, I'm not the guy to unpack the scandal here, all the bits and pieces. I'll leave that to reporters who are digging deep into it. Sounds like the New York Post put out an article with some sourcing about the situation today. I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm not saying to go there and read it and believe it 100%. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying this is what has happened, but I am saying this is what's currently been rumored. So if you want to figure it out, go for it. But what I want to talk about is what this shakeup means for Ohio State, especially their powerhouse football program, a little bit on the basketball side, and most crucially, the whole decision-making machinery of the Big Ten Conference. Now, if you are somebody who's not a Buckeye fan, if you're a Big Ten fan, you need to hear this part because Carter wasn't just any president. Of course, he was at Nebraska and then Ohio State, positioned himself as a real heavyweight in the Big Ten decision-making room. And his exit leaves a void that's going to echo across the league, possibly even echo in college football. So let me back up for a second and kind of give you the quick rundown of why this matters, and then we'll kind of continue to get into it without being too bogged down. All right, just to let you know. Carter came aboard in 2024, fresh off leading the University of Nebraska system. Before that, he was a big shot in the Navy, vice admiral, fighter pilot, the whole deal. Slap shot was his nickname there. All right, pretty cool nickname, by the way. At Ohio State, he hit the ground running, rolled out the Education for Citizenship 2035 strategic plan, bumped up the university's national ranking, grew research spending, and launched a bunch of new scholarships. The board even tipped their hat to him in their statement, saying his team elevated Ohio State's position as a national leader. But I know, it's the boring stuff. Here's the football side of stuff, okay? As president, he sat on the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors. That's the group with the ultimate authority of everything that goes on in the Big Ten. We're talking conference policies, the budget, financial stuff, conference expansion and realignment, even hiring and overseeing the conference commissioner. It's like the Supreme Court of the Big Ten deciding the fate of the league. And Carter, representing Ohio State, one of the mega brands, one of the biggest brands, if not the biggest brand, I think the biggest brand in the conference, he had become a very big voice in those rooms. And that totally tracks because if you look at the ongoing talks about unequal revenue sharing, he was positioning himself, pushing hard for a model that favored high viewership teams like the Buckeyes, like the Wolverines, arguing it made sense in an era of billion-dollar media deals. Even possibly, there's some speculation out there that he was saying, if you don't give us what we want, we might just leave the Big Ten when our grant of rights is up and stuff like that. That's important because the Big Ten isn't just a collection of schools playing ball. It's a massive enterprise, raking in hundreds of millions of dollars a year, possibly even billions of dollars, right? TV rights alone and decisions, they're rippling out to every program. Carter was right in the thick of it, assessing the proposed $2.4 billion UC investments deal a few months ago, but with it being paused, he was still trying to find other solutions. One big thing about him, though, is he was skeptical about further expansion. He was not an expansionist. He was not somebody that was like, yep, let's go add all these teams, let's do all this stuff. He was warning publicly that adding more teams could dilute the athletic brand and identity of Ohio State and possibly other existing members as well. Like watering down a strong cup of coffee until it's bland, he said things like, we're not going to dilute the brand any further, echoing what Ohio State athletic director Ross Bjork has been saying too. And on the NIL front, Carter called the current setup unsustainable. He was somebody that said things have to change. We cannot continue doing things the way they are, pushing for a more centralized control to rein in the cost. He wasn't just quoting the all these different people out there. He was explaining how the exploded expenses were threatening the financial health of athletic departments, especially for non-revenue sport. The Columbus Dispatch reported on this extensively, noting his vocal criticism in conference discussions. This wasn't pie in the sky type of stuff. It was grounded in the reality of Big Ten schools are shelling out millions more each year, and without checks, smaller programs could get squeezed out and possibly not have their program the way it was before. Now, what does this mean for Ohio State football? We'll get into the Big Ten here in just a minute. Bear with me. Honestly, doesn't mean not an immediate thing for Ohio State football. The Buckeyes are a well-oiled machine, rolling along like a freight train that's hard to derail. Ryan Day's entering his 8th season as head coach, fresh off the 2025 national championship one. Not say fresh off, 2 years ago, off that national championship run. The program's got the recruiting firepower, the facilities, the fan base that keeps it humming. Carter was involved for sure. He memorized player stats and stuff like that on the transfer portal. Honestly, kind of crazy how much it seemed like he knew about this football team. Didn't just know some players. He was memorizing stats as well. But the day-to-day ops, that's more in Ross Bjork's hand as the athletic director. Bjork's now stepping up in an even bigger role, becoming the more vocal leader for Ohio State in these national conversations about the future of college athletics. Things like NIL legislation, potential NCAA tournament expansion, the ever-shifting college football playoff format. Bjork's got to protect the Buckeyes' interests here. Any in evidence from this places like Letterman Row backs this as they point out how Ohio State's at the forefront of these shifting things with no president in place right now. So Bjork's role amplifies. Football is the front porch of the university, as they say, drawing in donors and eyeballs. So stability here is key. And basketball, similar thing. Not going to spend too much time on it. Just indulge me for a second. All right, less seismic, but still. Tight end, Jake Diebler's men's team, Kevin McGuff, the women's team, they're building momentum. But again, the president's role is more high level, ensuring alignment with the AD, the vision, keep all 36 varsity sports afloat without cuts. Carter was committed to that, and his exit means the new hire has to buy in too. So no immediate fallout, but it underscores how presidential decisions filter down to coaching hires, budgets, and even NIL collectives that help land top hoops and football talents out there as well. But here's where it gets really interesting. All right. If you're a Big Ten fan, you stuck it out. This is where the payoff is. All right. Here's where it gets really interesting and really big. I mean, really big for the Big Ten as a whole. Carter had accumulated a ton of political capital in the conference. He was stacking chips at the, at a high stakes poker table, I guess you could say. It wasn't actually at a poker table. I'm just using it as an illustration here. Okay. Don't start that rumor that was happening. He supported the UC investment deal that could have injected massive cash in the league with stakes for a for-profit enterprise and extended media rights into 2046. He was also going to be a huge decision maker in that and wanted more power if it was going to happen. Most schools backed it except for USC and Michigan, and Carter's willingness to push forward, even with Ohio State's concern about board power, earned him some allies out there as well. If you remember, as my friend Greg Flugard has reported, Ohio State acquiesced to adding Oregon and Washington back in 2023, giving them leverage in future expansion talks. To be frank, this is the first time in ages Ohio State was truly leading the charge of the Big Ten future, but not just, a big voice, but the aggressive voice that's in the room. And that's kind of what Ohio State has failed to do in the past, is be the aggressor. That's what Ted Carter was being. He was being the aggressor. He was acquiescing where he could, so that way he could be the aggressor. But Carter's gone now. And with the league pushing for a 24-team college football playoff expansion amid talks of potential, kind of NFL junior split of antitrust laws change, his skepticism was a counterweight. He warned the current path wasn't sustainable, and without him, expansionists forces might gain some ground faster than they would have before. The timing feels off, right? But as the playoff negotiations heat up, this creates instability, a fracture, even as Greg Flugard puts it, in the conference, already navigating NIL chaos and revenue debates. This all brings us to the question of where does Ohio State go with their new hire? Because this is going to be massive. I think they're likely going to go on the outside again, but just like they did when they brought in Carter. But they could also look for someone on the internal circle as well. I mean, I don't mean to get out of the question, but it really could go either way at this point. The board's expected to name an interim soon, possibly spreading leadership duties temporarily, but the permanent pick is going to be huge. They want a president who can slide right into the conference seat and keep Ohio State's thumb on the scale. Someone with a clear vision for athletics, aligned in lockstep with Ross Bjork and the coaches, not diluting the brand, pushing for structures that favor mega brands like the Buckeyes in revenue and expansion. Evidence from this past hire shows that prioritizing outsiders for fresh perspectives does help, but this is a time when Ohio State might not be able to afford doing that. With fractures possibly in the Big Ten, congressional involvement in the NIL, and the whole landscape shifting like tectonic plates, they can't afford a listening type of guy. Like, they can't afford a guy that's just going to listen and do stuff for a year. Things are moving fast. They need a guy who is going to ramp up, make decisions, be decisive, be aggressive, and do what needs to be done. Someone who can understand the high stakes games of conference politics without starting from scratch. If they get that right, Ohio State stays at the helm. Botch it, and the Buckeyes' influence could wane just when college football's future is up for grabs. This is shocking development. This is a shocking development. But Ohio State's engines are still firing all cylinders. The university's strong. The programs are powerhouse level. But losing a guy like Carter at this moment shakes the foundation of the Big Ten's conference decision making. We're watching closely for this interim announcement. It could signal if the next president's an inside or outside guy, or maybe even another guy from the Big Ten. That's a possibility as well. Either way, this hire might be the most pivotal in years to come for steering the conference through these choppy waters. What a day in the Big Ten. Let me know what you think about this whole situation. What do you think about Ted Carter? What do you think about him losing kind of his seat and his decision-making in the conference? Would love to know your thoughts.